Florida State is going to have a five-star that's committed to another school on campus this upcoming weekend, and it's a bigger deal than a lot of people realize for a couple of reasons. Florida State is obviously recruiting at a better clip right now than they have been in the recent past, and this weekend, five-star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith will be on campus as first reported by Noles 247 Zach Blostein. Now, Smith is committed to Ohio State, but he actually turned down another program to be in Tallahassee this weekend. We'll tell you which one that is and why it's a big deal in just a moment. Now, Smith verbally committed to Ohio State on December 14th of last year. Again, he's a five-star wide receiver, and he's considered the 247 composite number 2 overall player this recruiting cycle. And he's the top wide receiver in the country. He's 6'3", weighs 198 pounds. He plays football for Chaminade Madonna Prep down there in South Florida. Last year, he caught 58 passes for over 1,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. He obviously is going to have a massive senior season if he can really just duplicate that. But if he gets any better from his junior or senior years, it's going to be pretty ridiculous to think about the kind of numbers that he can and will put up. There's a reason he's the top wide receiver in the country. Smith was originally supposed to be in Gainesville this weekend for their recruiting event. Florida's doing a big event. They call it the Grill in the Ville. But plans have changed, and he will be in Tallahassee this weekend for the Seminole Showcase. Why is that important? Well, for a couple of reasons. Shows number one that elite players like Smith are prioritizing Florida State over Florida head-to-head. That's a big deal because Florida State is going to need to win recruiting battles against Florida and some of the other elite programs that are actually playing well on the field this upcoming cycle and for cycles in the future. Winning small head-to-head battles like this against Florida are a big deal. It also shows that Florida State is probably very likely ahead of UF in the battle for second place, which is important, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Number 3, anytime you can get some wins, whether small, large, whatever, against UF, it's a big deal, and Florida State's gotten this. Now, what's all this mean big picture for Smith? Well, the race for second in this recruitment is a real thing. Maybe more so than any other recruit or recruitment that we are dealing with this year or really have dealt with for quite a while. Let's talk about that in detail, but just before we do, I do want to give some love to our friends over at Garnet and Gold. Listen, season is just about 40 days away. You guys know this, but Garnet and Gold should be the only place that you're shopping for FSU gear, merchandise, athletic wear, apparel, whether you're looking for the new jerseys, the polos, the Nike shoes that come out of it, whatever you are looking for, FSU wear or FSU related, make sure you're shopping at garnetandgold.com. NOSLAW, that's NOSLAW for 15% off. Back to the race for second. Ohio State leads this recruitment by a pretty large margin, which makes sense because he's committed there. But two things could certainly happen that could have an impact on that. Number one, and probably the most important, is that Brian Hartline is probably one of the best assistant coaches in the entire country. He's certainly the best wide receiver coach in the nation. And there are rumors circulating, just like there are for certain FSU coaches, that this might be his last year at Ohio State. If Ohio State was to see pretty good success this year, could Brian Hartline move on and be offered an offensive coordinator or a head coach position elsewhere? Absolutely. A lot of people have brought up or asked about the Northwestern role being potentially open at the end of this year with everything that they've had going on. And I do think that that's a legitimate possibility. Smith's recruitment is definitely tied heavily to Hartline being at OSU. And if he was to end up at Northwestern or another school, how could that change things? The other situation is that if Ohio State doesn't perform well enough to their own standards, could that staff be replaced? Now, if Ryan Day was to be replaced, could Hartline be elevated there and so the impact be less? Absolutely. but there's always the chance that that staff could be let go and a new staff be brought in. I know that Ohio State's going to have probably a good year, but if they go 10-2 again and lose to Michigan, a lot of people are going to be calling for them to upgrade from Ryan Day. And how does that factor in with Smith, Hartline, and the rest of the folks there at Ohio State? Just something to kind of keep an eye on. Number two, if Hartline doesn't take or get a job this offseason elsewhere, there's still a decent chance that he could move on the year after. And what happens there? Hartline is not going to be the wide receiver coach at Ohio State for 2 more seasons. And so what would be the situation then? Would Florida State be able to lure Smith out of the portal? You guys know how good Mike Norvell is in the transfer portal, how good of a job the Battle's End does there as well. Especially at the wide receiver position, you'd have to like FSU's chances if that situation played itself out. Now, whether it was to happen this offseason, next offseason, whenever, I know that's all kind of projecting far out. But again, Hartline being at Ohio State is the deciding factor here. And if Hartline isn't there, whether it is after this season or after the next, I do think that Florida State would certainly keep the waters warm for Jeremiah Smith. Now, all of this said, Florida State's chances of flipping him with Hartline there are extremely low. And I wouldn't put in any kind of prediction or anything that would try to convey you guys or convince you guys of something else. But if there was ever a recruitment where finishing second mattered, it would be this one. Does Florida State have a chance to flip him if Hartline stays? Maybe. Taking care of business on the field this year, and Smith maybe wanting to stay closer to home as one of his teammates just did a couple of weeks ago, gives you a slight chance. Chances are pretty slim, but I don't think it's impossible. I think it's probably in the realm of so you're telling me there's a chance from Dumb and Dumber, but it is something. Florida State is going to be pretty aggressive with NIL opportunities, and we'll see if that has an impact. We'll see what kind of year they can have on the field, and if they can take care of business there, maybe you've got a shot. But their best chance is going to be Hartline leaving, which, again, could happen this offseason, could happen the next one, and then you put yourself in a good position for him. You're probably running ahead of the Gators right now. I think you need to also make sure that you stay ahead of Miami, who is also going to be very, very big in his ear. And in that recruitment, they just landed JoJo Trader, a guy that I think the Seminoles want to continue to recruit. But I think having his teammate and having him close to home would be something pretty substantial for Miami. So Florida State needs to hold off both other big schools in the Big Three to have a chance to finish second here. And if Hartline leaves, maybe end up getting the flip. I will say this, Florida State has done a much better job this cycle of getting elite talent on campus. 2 years ago, they did a phenomenal job of that. Remember, that was the Travis Hunter year, and a lot of guys wanted to be on campus because Hunter was on campus and because they wanted to be around him. But the last cycle, the last year or so, was a little bit more lackluster for the Noles. This year, things have definitely trended back up positively, and the recruiting results are starting to show and take effect. Florida State has a couple of big-time targets announcing this week, both in Charles Lester and KJ Bolden. We've been updating our Discord almost on a daily or sometimes even hourly basis on what's going on in those two recruitments. So if you're not in there, you need to join. It's free. The link is in the description. If you want exclusive info in there, there's an option for that as well. Speaking on Lester, if you haven't heard the very latest on his recruitment and a potential surprise visit, you can click right here to get caught up on all of it.